much for joining us today. We are going to be talking all about data and advertising. And specifically, the objective of this training is to take an in-depth look essentially at the method that as newspapers, we can actually utilize to successfully become online publishers. So each and every lesson, it does cover essentially all of the different elements that any news business must in fact take notice from all the different things that they can do essentially to shaping up the overall value proposition, the pricing, the acquisition, and churn. Each lesson essentially is going to break things into three key topics. So we're going to identify so what, focus, and then what can we do now? The aim essentially is to give clear, actionable instructions to help with our overall news publications to become a commercial success online. So you might be wondering, who is our speaker here today? My name is Lena. I have over 20 years of experience specializing in digital marketing, as well as being a speaker and presenter. We're also joined by our amazing moderator, Romy, who's going to be on the background, and Romy is going to be helping us along with all of the different links and tools that I will be sharing. We have any number of lessons. And specifically today, we are going to be covering all about essentially data. Now, getting the most out of our training, what we are here to provide you is with a variety of options that are essentially are available to you. It is really, really important that these are just options, and essentially the world of digital publishing is a very, very complex environment, as I'm sure you're probably aware. And each and every business essentially has its own unique challenges. So different audiences and varying amount of resources are available. And we are here to show you the case studies, the actions, the resources, the tools. It is entirely up to you how you're going to combine all of those resources and all of those tools based on your needs, experience, and overall goals. So understanding essentially our data can be very, very helpful because it can enable us to target more effectively. Essentially, ads have been a very, very key revenue driver for our publishers. In the past, it has been, fairly simple solution, but there have been a lot of changes in relation to essentially data and what it may mean for publishers. And we do have to rethink all of the different advertising strategies as a result and actually, try to get closer even to the overall data. So what is going to be our focus? What is our agenda here today? What are the topics that we are going to be covering? In this lesson, we're going to focus in three different topics. Our very first topic is going to be all about the relationship between data and ads. And essentially, we're going to be talking about those third-party cookies. The second topic that we are going to be focusing on is all about contextual targeting. Essentially, what might in fact be replacing those third-party cookies. And our third topic is going to be a closer look essentially at what that first-party data is and how is it that we can actually utilize it. So, kicking things off, introducing our very first topic, the relationship between data and advertising. So let's go deeper into that particular topic. Cookies, publishers, advertisers, ads, it's a very, very interesting mix. They all have a mutually beneficial relationship. Essentially, as advertisers, we want to reach a certain audience, one that essentially connects the brand or the products. A publisher may have that certain audience already coming to their particular website, reading their overall content. So the publisher essentially doesn't know for sure. Of course, there isn't sort of an exact science. So it has an audience that is going to be specific to one particular advertiser, to what that particular advertising is looking for. So essentially, that's where third-party cookies come in. They make it possible to see, more about the interests of that particular reader, the interest that they might have, and essentially where have they been before, and even who they are to a certain extent. So essentially, let's look back a little bit of a history lesson. To look forward, we might actually have to see essentially what has happened. So, what did we have before third-party cookies? Before third-party cookies, essentially as brands, we would choose where we could go out there and buy advertising space, and that was, that context that we had was that lens. So, for example, imagine we are working with a sportswear retailer, and they simply want to choose display in their overall digital marketing campaign on their sites, and they want to identify where is it that they are going to be seen. So people who are going to be interested in that type of content. So for instance, they would select ESPN, they might select Runner's World, right? So they would specifically identify, based on that interest, here's a corresponding publisher that typically tends to have that type of content. Third-party cookies. So the third-party cookies, they are essentially an effective way that has been created by the digital advertising world. And essentially, the digital advertising world, as we know it at this point in time, it grew from those third-party cookies. Essentially, they're a piece of information that is sent from the website and is stored in that user's browser. So we have first-party cookies, and first-party cookies, they are employed essentially by the owners of the websites, the owners of those particular pages. So when a visitor comes in, all of that information is saved and saves all of those details. So that would be first-party cookies. Third-party cookies, they are essentially primarily used for advertising and retargeted advertising. So we sort of see the differences and a little bit of a definition between the two. Now, programmatic and the birth of programmatic. So these cookies, they do essentially provide an opportunity for others to gain that important information about that particular user, about their history, about their interests. However, the task of the media buying team is essentially to scale, which can be challenging, which can be difficult, and at times it could even be near impossible. So this challenge, has it solved? How has it been solved? Introducing programmatic, which essentially is a simple way to automate the ad buying as well as the overall bidding. It's achieved by the advertising, that holy grail of that one-to-one personalized relationship. So as we can see essentially how beneficial third-party cookies are, and they have been for the advertisers and the publishers by creating that premium product. Essentially, programmatic buying isn't just efficient, it leads to more better, sophisticated, and more relevant campaigns. So it's a really, really helpful tool. Now, there is nothing like that digital marketing world that continues to evolve, that continues to change. And on January 14th, 2020, Google announced that it's going to phase out that support for third-party cookies in the Chrome browser. And that was going to take, and it's going to happen over the next couple of years. So that was back in 2020. A lot of things changed in 2020. And essentially, in order to make the web more secure and more private for users, so effectively, Chrome will be joining other browsers such as Safari, such as Firefox, and essentially blocking those third-party cookies. So why? So the reason essentially why this made such a overall change and commotion in the overall advertising and publishing industry is because Chrome is one of the most popular web browsers, and that is used by over 60% of users from all around the world. So the prediction of that overall death of the third-party cookies, the cookie is crumbling. It has essentially long been floated, prior to that explosion in mobile and web browser and all of those inherent difficulties with tracking users across devices, and tracking users across all of the different products. So essentially, leaving cookies inefficient at building a full picture for the particular user. So, coupling this with the overall awakening among users from all around the world, about our private data and the demand for privacy, this privacy focused world that essentially is emerging right in front of our eyes, it should not come to us as an overall as an overall surprise, right? So, what does it mean essentially for publishers and for advertisers? Can in fact effectively be a bit of a bumpy ride, right? We've been here before. We are here to embrace change. So, what are the options? What are the alternatives? So, if third-party cookies are on their way out, right? So, what will the industry essentially use instead? What are the options that we have? So, here's a couple of different options: contextual targeting and first party data. So, contextual targeting and first party data. So, let's go in and let's take a look at those two. So, introducing essentially our second topic, all about contextual targeting. So, let's actually see contextual targeting in very, very simple terms. It's all about selling ads that are based upon the content on that particular page. So, let's go a little bit deeper. Let's elaborate on that. Essentially, because advertisers, they won't be able to specifically target individual users by using that third party cookie. An easy prediction is to revive the contextual advertising campaigns. This could be essentially only one of the ways that we can utilize to target based on interest, and we can target at a big scale. So, contextual advertising, they are in fact based on content that the user is looking at right here, right now, instead of the history, their browser history, or instead of that individual behavior on that particular profile. So, it is supposed to be a more interesting, for users. And essentially, what we're going to be seeing is ads that match the overall theme of that particular web page when we're visiting that particular page. So, for instance, imagine we have an example. A fashion brand might choose to be seen on Vogue magazine. A company selling financial services, they might actually have better luck with Forbes, right? So we're actually seeing a couple of examples of how that would play out and what that would look like. So essentially, contextual advertising, the ads, they are there to enhance the overall content. So this is a great opportunity. This potentially be a great opportunity to enhance our content as publishers. So for example, imagine we are a sports publisher and we are writing an article about football or writing an article about basketball. It can be any example. And we already have a very good understanding of our particular audience, of essentially who they are and what is it that they do. So we could easily argue that we could easily add essentially an ad to that specifically about football memorabilia or basketball memorabilia, sports equipment, or even that are specifically related to the teams in that particular article. And that would overall enhance the user experience, as opposed to unrelated sort of topics or things that they were looking at the previous day. So we can see that there is an appeal here for the overall advertisers in wanting to essentially to be featured in such curated content and to showcase those particular ads there. And it's also a much better experience for the end user as well. Metrics absolutely matter. Engagement metrics essentially help publishers understand how much value they're finding in that particular content. So each reader's time is very, very important. It is very, very valuable. And engagement essentially is how publishers can measure the overall value of engaging with the readers. So which specific engagement metrics are essential? Essentially, that is going to vary and depend, on each and every publication. However, here's a helpful list to get us started. Some of the most common engagement metrics specifically for publishers that can actually help us measure. So comments, social shares, recirculation, time spent on that page, watch time, and pages per session. So some 6 very, very helpful metrics, as opposed to focusing on metrics which might not necessarily for publishers, right? That's really, really key because the metrics are really going to vary and depend on essentially the industry as well as the overall content that we're producing, as opposed to page views or unique visitors or top exit pages. So some really, really helpful content and information. So does this actually work? We do have a case study, and this is a case study that is coming to us from Rappler. Rappler is an online news website, and they're based in Manila, that also publishes in English. So it is among one of the very first news websites specifically in Philippines to make that extensive use of online multimedia video as well as audio, along with using the text and using pictures as well. So Rappler, what they did is that they saw an opportunity to essentially to position the data as an integral part of achieving all of their strategic objectives. So this particular organization, this particular publisher, they decided to grow their overall research and the data teams in order to improve their understanding of their audience and the consumption habits of their particular audience. So this has actually seen a 20% increase in overall average monthly readers year over year, as well as an 8% increase in the number of articles that their audience read for each and every site visit. So some really, really fantastic results that Rappler managed to see. So now we're going to be introducing our third topic in our agenda, first party data. So the contextual targeting, was one option for replacing the third-party cookies. So here's another one that we're going to be talking about, and that's going to be first-party data. So let's actually go in and understand it a little bit better. So, for now, it looks like publishers essentially could do essentially a lot worse than try to obtain that top-notch first-party data right from their customers. So knowing our customers is really, really key. So ad networks, what they're doing is that they are working on solutions to essentially to replace the third-party cookies, but they do remain unknown to some extent, right? So it seems inevitable that the first-party data will essentially become even more pivotal, even more crucial, even more important than what it is right now. So once the third-party cookie has crumbled, once it has gone, it will essentially need to revert back to creating those relationships, direct relationships with our customers, to listen to them, to talk to them, to understand them. So we will need to essentially be very, very strategic to find ways to join those conversations rather than focusing on the number of views. So first party data, it provides us with an opportunity to create those strong relationships and ties with our overall customers and with our overall prospects. Reader data, another really, really helpful tool that can actually help us as well. So developing our very own first party data, because that's still going to be available to us, right? So essentially, first party data is that information that we collect right from our customers. Somebody comes to our website, they come to our apps, And all of those actions, all of those interactions with our overall products and our services, we can collect that information right from the first party data. So to be considered for that first party data, that information must be collected from our own sites, from our own apps, from our physical, our retail locations as well. So essentially, a very good way of paraphrasing this is when we look at that direct interaction with us, with our products, with our services. So essentially, it comes back to that engagement with our readers. That's really, really important and very, very key. So, for example, we could invite our readers to subscribe to an email newsletter, which could be a fantastic way to build that direct relationship rather than trying to track them through the browser on our website. Or we can essentially find a way of introducing some type of user logging requirement, allowing us essentially to track the user in a unique and highly personalized way as well. So, single view of that particular user. So what's the first party data? Let's see some examples of first party data. So someone's name, someone's first name, someone's last name, their email, their phone number, demographics. Those are some examples of first party data. How do we go about collecting that first party data? How can we get all of this information? A number of different ways, right? People come to our website, we can ask them to subscribe to an overall newsletter. Maybe we can give them a bit of an incentive. We can give them behind the scenes, right? You subscribe to a newsletter, you essentially give us your information, and now we're going to give you something better that other people that have not subscribed to our newsletter are not able to get. Other ways that we can utilize and we can collect that first party data: downloading a report. Again, that can be a really helpful tool. We can create free reports or maybe infographics. We can say, you want to download this information. It is free. It is available to you in exchange for your first party data. Other tools that we can utilize, they come to our website, we can invite them to participate in a survey, and giving people incentives, giving essentially something that is going to help them, something that is going to be helpful, that is going to make a difference to them, is going to be really helpful. Because essentially, when somebody says, okay, I'm going to fill out this information, what's in it for me? We need to provide that answer. We need to give them something. Now, email subscriptions, essentially, those email addresses, they can be used in a wide variety of ways. And it can be, in fact, a very valuable alternative to overall cookies, because by their nature, an email address is always specific and it's always unique to that particular user. So email addresses, they can be essentially, they can be anonymized, they can be given unique IDs, they can be used to essentially link together in a particular series. So they can be used in a number of different ways. And it's a fantastic first party data tool that we can in fact utilize. Now, another tool that we would also recommend is essentially to invest in a data management platform that is going to help us to collect, to store, and to sort all of that customer data. So that data management platform, or DMP, we love a good acronym, right? So to get started building our customer data, we are essentially likely to need that data management platform. This essentially is going to be used to collect, to store, and to sort through as well all of that information. So a data management platform on its own, essentially, what is it? It's a software. It's essentially a digital cabinet of sorts, if you will. And it has information about all of the different users. It has information about all of our audience. And it can connect it to essentially to an on-demand side platform. This is specifically for advertisers, or on the supply side platform, for the publishers. And essentially the options to connect the advertiser and the reader are now back again, right? They're on the table. So if we're already working, with a third party DMP, and that particular DMP can still create that first party segment for us, and now we can actually upload all of that information into the ads manager. So once we worked essentially with a third party to push out, to provide those segments into ads manager, those segments can in fact be available for targeting, for forecasting, for reporting, just like we would with any other first party segment. Some really, really helpful tools and some really, really helpful pieces of information that we can essentially utilize, that we can essentially put together. Now, when it comes to future solutions, right? Future solutions, essentially, we are going to be referring to the privacy box. Very, very simply, what is the privacy box again? The privacy box is a Google-backed project specifically for creating that thriving web ecosystem that is respectful of users and their privacy by default. So let's find a little bit more information about this Privacy Sandbox. So currently, Google is developing that open source solution to allow publishers as well as advertisers to build and sustain ad-supported websites, prior to the phasing out of those third-party cookies. So the Privacy Box is backed by Google, and its mission is to create a thriving web ecosystem that is respectful of people's privacy, and it does that automatically. It does that by default. In its current stage, essentially, you won't find those concrete solutions for replacing the third-party cookies in that. Instead, it does serve as a forum to work together, to collaborate, to share ideas in an effort to develop those open source web standards. So we do have a case study. This is a case study from Group Figaro, which in fact used a DMP to specifically understand, okay, who are the visitors and what are their purchase intentions? So who's Group Figaro again? It's a French media conglomerate that owns a number of newspapers and a number of magazines, such as Le Figaro, Madame Figaro TV magazine, and a lot of other ones as well as other titles in Italy, as well as in Brazil. Now, nearly 15% of their visitors that do in fact use Group Figaro, specifically they go there for purchasing any number of luxury goods. It could also be high-tech gadgets. It could be home improvement. Writers on the other side, on the publisher side, they were struggling to actually understand and to define visitors, their purchase interests, those people that came to that particular website. And they were essentially reviewing products that readers were not in fact interested in, or they were failing, they were sort of forgetting to review those products that actually would generate a lot of interest to their audience. So how did they overcome this? What was the solution to this challenge? So to gather insights right from the DMP about all of the different visitors and their purchase intents, and to refine that particular data, they imported the quality of this data in the editorial CMS, and then the journalists could actually create content that the readers were in fact looking for. They categorized the content with different product IDs and connected it with different merchants. And they actually maintained the content and kept the content up to date. So some really helpful tools and information. So I want you to, at this point, have a bit of a think, consider as we'll continue to evaluate and to discuss these topics. Do you have a strategy for collecting that first party data? Yes, no, maybe. What are some of the tools that we discuss and that we're going to continue to discuss today that you're going to put into action, write those down, and start building your action plan? So analytics tools, right? The different types of analytics tools that we can actually utilize. So we have Google Analytics 360, and essentially, what is it again? It's an enterprise level product. It provides advanced tools that can actually support to help large teams to get those actionable insights right from their data. So these are tools essentially, they include unsampled type of reports, BigQuery, export, and data-driven attribution, in addition to all of the standard Google Analytics features and reports. So how do we get started with Google Analytics for 360? So getting started with Google Analytics 360, we do have a course that actually walks you through how you could take advantage of that enterprise level features that you can gain right from Google Analytics 360. And in that course, you can essentially learn about all of the advanced features such as roll-up reporting, custom funnels, those unsampled reports, those custom tables. We can also gain those insights that will help us understand how we can benefit from overall reporting with BigQuery, those native integrations with Google Marketing Platform products, as well as the Google Ad Manager. So in this course, essentially, we'll provide with real life examples that will illustrate the overall value and how we can leverage that value of Analytics 360 and all of the different features and integrations that can really help us drive the overall performance and achieve our business goals and objectives. So if we're new to Google Analytics, we should actually start out with Google Analytics for beginners. It's okay, we all start somewhere, but now we're here, right? And utilize those advanced Google Analytics on Analytics Academy. And my amazing moderator, Rami, is actually going to be providing all of those links in the comments. So do not worry, we have you. We're going to be giving you all of those tools and all of those resources. So bringing it all together, a bit of a summary of all the different components and all of the different elements that we did discuss and covered today. So we had three main topics. We talked about that relationship between data and ads. We talked about that contextual targeting, and we talked about first-party data, and specifically we delved into that Google Analytics 360. So we do have another case study, and this case study comes to us from KG Media, which is Indonesia's largest publishing conglomerate. They have in fact used Google Analytics 360 to better understand essentially the audience before running programmatic guaranteed campaigns in their ads manager. So what were the goals? What were they trying to actually accomplish? They wanted to increase their CPMs on their particular site. And they wanted to increase essentially the airline advertiser, those conversions, while reducing the cost. And they wanted to display relevant, personalized advertising to the readers. So how did they do it? What was the approach, the solution to these objectives? So they actually utilized Google Analytics 360 to identify people who were in fact considering that airline travel, but they hadn't purchased their tickets yet. They were sort of flirting with the idea. Should I go on a trip? Should I not? Utilizing the Google Analytics 360, they sort of delved into that group in their audience. They created that custom audience segmentation, and then they run a programmatic campaign, which is actually going to be delivered. And it did, in fact, deliver those high relevant advertising. So what were the results? What was the outcome of this? They saw a 25 higher CPM specifically for their website and an 80%, 80 lower cost per flight search for the airline advertiser. So a win-win both for the publisher as well as the advertiser, bringing the best of both worlds combined in one place. So I'm going to open it up to questions. I'd love to hear some questions from our audience. It's always nice to have different types of questions. And I see we have a lot of questions, which is great, or a couple of questions, which is great, which is fantastic. One of our participants is asking, what is the difference between those first-party cookies and the third-party cookies? So, couple of items that we're going to be focusing on. First party cookies, they are specifically employed by the owners of that particular website. So when somebody comes to our website, they visit the website, and we save all of those details. Remember, it can be the first name, the last name, the email address, all of that information. Now, third-party cookies, they are primarily used in advertising for retargeting. So the difference between the two, first-party, employed by the website, the other ones, third-party, are essentially used for retargeting in advertising. So I do see another question, and the question is, one of our participants is asking, can you please remind us which metrics do we need to be focusing in as publishers? So before I go ahead and go through the metrics, keep in mind there isn't a one size fits all, right? So we always need to tie the metrics back to our objectives. Having said that, some helpful metrics that we can be utilizing is things like comments, social shares, recirculation, the time that it was spent on the page, the overall watch time, and the pages per session. Now, some of the metrics that we should not be focusing as much are things like unique visitors, top exit pages, as well as overall page views. I do see that we do have another question, and this is very, very specifically, I know we use a lot of acronyms. So what is DSP and SSP? Help us out. One of our participants is asking for help with these definitions. So let's kick things off with demand side platform. Demand side platform, or DSP. So on the advertiser side, essentially this would be a demand side platform that is connected to a data management platform. Now, supply side platform, or SSP, supply side platform. Essentially, suppliers, publishers in our example, they use a supply side platform, SSP, to distribute the availability of all of the different inventory across, it could be one or it could be multiple ad exchanges. So an SSP essentially can connect to several and different ad exchanges in order to overall maximize the publisher's exposure to potential buyers. And it can essentially help us set the minimum prices and dictate the specific buyers or the specific channels. So some really, really helpful tools, some really, really helpful pieces of information. I really, really appreciate all of the enthusiasm and everybody sharing with us. Now, my kind ask to you is to fill out the feedback form. I promise it's only going to take a couple minutes. Feedback is very much a gift. We take the time to put together all of this content and all of these seminars, and the more information we get from you, the better the sessions are going to be, the more sessions we could potentially have if that's what you ask for. So feedback is very much a gift. We always, always appreciate all of your different feedback and all of the different pieces of information. So, and we do have another session that is coming up. We do have a lot of different content and a lot of different sessions. So anything from business strategy to audience development to data management, advertising revenue, which is specifically data and ads, the topic that we covered in this session. And we also have reader revenue as well. And within that, we have a plethora of sessions, a plethora of information that we can actually be covering. Now, I know that we're very close to the end of this particular session. We do have another session that is going to be coming up, and that is going to be all about programmatic strategy. So we do encourage you to join us for that particular session. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for joining us in this session today. There's a lot more information. We have deep dive sessions where you have the opportunity to ask questions and get direct answers right from your local Google Teams. And like I said, feedback is very important to us. It is a gift. So the more feedback you provide, the more we can evolve, we can improve, and we can continue to build additional sessions. So it's always nice to get that feedback, just to have that information. So thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your participation. We really appreciate the enthusiasm with all of the questions. It's always nice to hear from our audience. And like I said, we are going to be going live in just about 20 minutes or so, 21 minutes, with our next session, which is going to be all about programmatic. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the next session.